The message came on a Tuesday morning, broadcast across every communication channel in human space. The Zerathi Empire, rulers of half the galaxy, had decided to talk to Earth. This was not good news. Admiral Kate Brooks sat in her chair at Earth Defense Command watching the alien transmission for the third time. The Zerathi ambassador stood 12 feet tall, covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. His voice sounded like grinding metal when he spoke. "Humans of Earth," the ambassador said, his 4 eyes glowing red in the darkness. "We claim the Kepler 442 system. Your miners work there without permission. This ends now." Kate paused the recording. The Kepler system held more rare minerals than 3 other systems combined. Earth needed those resources, but the Zerathi Empire had never lost a war. Their ships could destroy planets. Their soldiers could tear through tank armor with their bare hands. "Play the rest," Kate told her aide, Lieutenant Danny Clark. The ambassador continued speaking. "We offer you a choice. Leave the system or face us in honorable combat. 1 warrior from each side. Winner takes the system. You have 7 days to decide." The transmission ended. Kate stared at the blank screen. The Zerathi lived for combat. They had turned warfare into an art form. Their warriors trained from birth to kill, and they wanted to fight humanity in single combat. "What do we do?" Danny asked. Kate was quiet for a long moment. "Get me the Joint Chiefs, and find me our best fighter." 3 days later, the Zerathi made their choice public. Commander Vexthal would represent the Empire. The news networks across the galaxy went wild. Vexthal was a legend. 7 feet of pure muscle, covered in cybernetic armor that cost more than most space stations. He had fought in over 200 battles and never lost. The recordings of Vexthal's training sessions spread across the galaxy within hours. He moved like liquid death, faster than anything that Big had a right to move. His plasma cannon could melt through battleship armor. His claws could cut through steel like paper. Kate watched the footage with her staff. General Paul Martinez, head of Earth's Special Forces, shook his head. "This is impossible. Look at him. He's not just strong, he's smart. See how he moves. He's thinking 3 steps ahead." "What about Captain Ryan Torres?" Kate asked. "He won the combat championship last year." "Vexthal would kill him in 10 seconds, Martinez said. "What about the enhanced soldiers, the ones with the implants?" Kate pulled up another file. Zerathi specifically said no artificial enhancements, natural warriors only. Dr. Helen Walsh, the chief scientist, spoke up. "There might be another way." "We could—" "No," Kate said firmly. "We agreed to their terms. 1 warrior, no enhancements, no weapons beyond what the arena provides. We have to honor that." The debate went on for hours. Names were suggested and rejected. Every option seemed hopeless against Vexthal. Kate finally called for a break and walked to the window. Looking out at the city below. 200 miles above Earth, Jake Morrison was having the worst day of his life. The primary reactor at Luna Station was acting up again. The cooling system made sounds that hurt his ears. And his supervisor, Chief Engineer Bob Hardy, had just denied his vacation request. "I've been planning this trip for 6 months, Jake said, wiping grease from his hands. "I already bought the tickets." "Can't help you," Bob said, not looking up from his paperwork. "The reactor's been acting up. Can't spare you." Jake wanted to argue, but a loud bang from the reactor room cut him off. He grabbed his toolbox and headed for the problem. The reactor was humanity's most advanced piece of technology, and it broke down every other week. Jake had been fixing it for 8 years. He knew every bolt, every wire, every system. The cooling pump was making that sound again. Jake crawled into the maintenance tunnel, his wrench in hand. The pump was old, like everything else on the station, but it worked if you knew how to treat it right. "Come on, baby," Jake muttered, tightening a loose connection. "Don't give up on me now." The sound stopped. Jake smiled and backed out of the tunnel. He had been working on machines since he was 12 years old. His father had been a mechanic, and his grandfather before that. Jake could fix anything with moving parts. His comm unit buzzed. "Morrison, report to the captain's office." Bob's voice crackled through. Jake sighed and headed for the lift. "Captain..." Lisa Chun probably wanted to know about the reactor again. She worried too much about the old systems. Jake had told her a dozen times that the reactor was fine. It just needed regular attention. The captain's office was on the command deck with a view of Earth below. Jake had always liked the view. It reminded him why he did this job. Someone had to keep the lights on. "Sit down, Jake," Captain Chun said. She looked nervous. "Is this about the reactor?" "Because I already fixed. It's not about the reactor." She handed him a datapad. "Read this." Jake looked at the screen. It was an official Earth Defense Command order. His name was at the top. Below that were words that made no sense. Champion, Combat, Zarathi Empire. "This is a mistake," Jake said. "I'm not a soldier. I'm a mechanic." "I know," Captain Chun said, "but the order is official. Someone in the Defense Command entered your name as Earth's champion." Jake stared at the pad. "This is crazy. I can't fight aliens. I fix machines." "The transport leaves in 2 hours," Captain Chun said. "You need to pack." Jake stood up, still holding the datapad. "There has to be a mistake. Call them back. Tell them I'm not a fighter." "I tried," Captain Chun said. "But the challenge was already broadcast. The Zarathi know your name. We can't change it now?" Jake looked out the window at Earth. Somewhere down there, people were counting on him. People who had no idea that their champion was a 42-year-old man who spent his days fixing broken machines. "What am I supposed to do?" Jake asked. Captain Chun stood up and put a hand on his shoulder. "Win," she said simply. The transport ship USS Victory was not built for comfort. Jake sat in his small cabin, still wearing his work jumpsuit, staring at the wall. 3 hours ago, he had been fixing a cooling pump. Now he was flying toward certain death. Captain Lisa Chun had insisted on commanding the transport personally. She found Jake in the mess hall, picking at his food. The other crew members gave him strange looks when they thought he wasn't watching. "How are you holding up?" Lisa asked, sitting across from him. "I keep thinking this is a bad dream," Jake said. "Any minute now, I'll wake up and Bob will be yelling at me to fix something." Lisa pulled out a datapad. "The media is calling you the underdog of the century. The betting odds are—" She paused. "Well, they're not good." Jake laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "What are the odds?" 12,000 to 1, against you. That's it," Jake said. "I thought they'd be worse." Through the mess hall's viewport, Jake could see the stars streaming past. They were traveling faster than light, heading for a place called Keth 7, the neutral moon where he would die. "Tell me about this Vexthal guy," Jake said. Lisa switched to another file. "Commander Vexthal. Age unknown, but he's been fighting for over 50 years. He's 7 feet tall, weighs about 400 pounds. His armor can stop plasma blasts. His weapons can cut through tank armor." "Great," Jake muttered. "What else?" "He's fought in over 200 battles, never lost. The Zarathi consider him their greatest warrior." Lisa paused. "Jake, why do you think they chose you?" "I mean, there has to be a reason," Jake shrugged. "Clerical error. Someone typed the wrong name into the computer. It happens." But Lisa wasn't convinced. Earth Defense Command doesn't make mistakes like that. Not with something this important. The next day, Jake found himself in the ship's computer center with Lieutenant Mike Stevens, the communications officer. Mike was young, maybe 25, with the kind of excitement that came from being part of something historic. "You have to see this," Mike said, pulling up a video feed. "The Zarathi released training footage of Vexthal." Jake watched the screen. Vexthal moved through a training course like a force of nature. He destroyed metal targets with his bare hands. His plasma cannon melted through steel barriers. When he moved, it looked like watching a predator hunt. "He's fast," Jake said. "Fast." "Doesn't cover it," Mike replied. "Look at this part." The video showed Vexthal dodging laser fire from multiple sources. He moved like water, flowing around the beams while returning fire with deadly accuracy. Every shot hit its target. Every movement was perfect. "They're broadcasting this across the galaxy," Mike said. "Everyone's watching. The Zarathi want to show how strong their champion is." Jake turned away from the screen. "I've seen enough. Wait, Mike said. There's more. They interviewed him. Despite himself, Jake looked back. Vexthel stood in what looked like a throne room, surrounded by other Zerathi warriors. When he spoke, his voice was deep and cold. The human will die with honor, Vexthel said. I will make it quick. Their species deserves respect for accepting this challenge. That's nice of him, Jake said dryly. He's not trying to be mean, Mike said. The Zerathi respect courage. They think you're brave for accepting the fight. I didn't accept anything. Jake said, I got volunteered. Over the next 2 days, Jake explored the ship. He found the engine room and spent hours looking at the systems. The chief engineer, a woman named Carol Price, was surprised to find him there. You're not supposed to be in here, she said. Sorry, Jake said. I was just curious. This is a nice setup. Type 7 fusion drive, right? Carol's attitude changed. You know engines? I'm a mechanic, Jake said. I work on the reactors at Luna Station. No kidding. I heard those things are temperamental, Jake laughed. That's putting it nicely. They break down every other week. But once you understand how, they work. They're not so bad. Carol showed him around the engine room. Jake asked questions about the power systems, the cooling setup, the backup generators. It felt good to talk about something normal. Can I ask you something? Carol said. Are you really going to fight this Vexthel guy? Looks like it, Jake said. Aren't you scared? Jake thought about it, terrified. But what choice do I have? If I don't fight, Earth loses the system? People are counting on me. But you're just a mechanic. Yeah, Jake said. But I'm a good mechanic. 3 days into the journey, Jake got access to the files about Keth 7. The moon was covered in ancient ruins, mostly old factories and industrial sites. The battle would take place in a massive complex called the Central Processing Facility. Jake studied the layouts and technical specifications. The facility was huge, covering several square miles. It had multiple levels, conveyor systems, and processing equipment that was thousands of years old. Most of it was still functional, powered by some kind of self-sustaining energy source. This is interesting, Jake said, showing the files to Captain Chun. What do you mean? It's a factory. I understand factories. Jake pointed to a schematic. Look at this. Power distribution, mechanical systems, automated processes. It's just like the facilities I work on, only bigger. But it's alien technology, Chun said. You can't possibly understand how it works. Jake smiled for the first time since leaving Earth. Engineering is engineering. Physics is physics. Machines work the same way everywhere. That night, Jake made a request that surprised everyone. Instead of asking for weapons or armor, he wanted tools, cutting torches, electrical components, chemical compounds, and spare parts. What are you planning to do? Captain Chun asked. I don't know yet, Jake said, but I want to be prepared. This isn't about fixing machines, Chun said. You're going to be fighting for your life. Jake looked at her seriously. Captain, I've been fixing machines my whole life. Broken things. Dangerous things. Things that everyone else said were impossible to repair. Maybe that's exactly what I need to do here. Chun stared at him. You're not planning to fight him, are you? You're planning to fix something. Maybe, Jake said. We'll see what's broken when I get there. The next morning, Jake found himself in the ship's workshop with Chief Petty Officer Don Walsh, going through tools and supplies. Don was a practical man who understood the value of good equipment. You sure about this? Don asked, packing Jake's toolkit. Most people would want a big gun. I'm not most people, Jake said. Besides, what good would a gun do me? I'm not a soldier. So what's your plan? Jake picked up his favorite wrench, a 40-year-old tool that had been with him since his apprentice. Days, I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to fix things. Dan looked at him like he was crazy. You're going to fix your way out of a fight to the death? Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe I'm going to break something that needs breaking. 2 days later, they reached Keth 7. The moon hung in space like a giant metal ball, covered in the ruins of an ancient civilization. The central processing facility was visible from orbit. A massive complex of towers and industrial structures. Jake stood at the viewport, looking down at his destination. In a few hours, he would be down there, facing the greatest warrior in the galaxy. Second thoughts? Captain Chun asked. About 1,000,000 of them, Jake said. But I'm still going. Why? Jake thought about the people back on Earth, the miners in the Kepler system, the families who depended on those resources. He thought about his own family, his friends, everyone who was counting on him. Because somebody has to, he said. And apparently that somebody is me. The shuttle carrying Jake descended through Keth 7's thin atmosphere toward the central processing facility. Through the viewport, Jake could see the massive industrial complex spreading out below him. It looked like a metal city, all towers, and pipes and conveyor belts that stretched for miles. "This place is huge," said Lieutenant Mike Stevens, who was piloting the shuttle. Jake pressed his face to the window. The facility was bigger than he had imagined. Ancient alien machinery filled every space, connected by a network of walkways and transport systems. Some of the equipment was still running after thousands of years. "Look at those power lines," Jake said, pointing to thick cables that ran between the buildings. "Still carrying electricity. Whatever built this place, they built it to last." The shuttle landed on a platform near the center of the complex. Jake stepped out, carrying his toolbox and wearing his work jumpsuit. The air smelled of metal and ozone. Somewhere in the distance, machinery hummed with quiet power. "Good luck," Mike said from the shuttle door. "The whole galaxy is watching." Jake nodded and walked toward the entrance of the main building. Above him, camera drones buzzed through the air, broadcasting his every move to billions of viewers across the galaxy. He ignored them. The entrance led to a vast chamber that stretched up 5 stories. Conveyor belts ran through the space at different levels, carrying nothing but moving constantly. Robotic arms hung from the ceiling, frozen in place but ready to work. The floor was covered with machinery that Jake didn't recognize but somehow understood. "This is a sorting facility," Jake said to himself, looking around. "Raw materials come in one end, finished products go out the other." He walked deeper into the complex, his footsteps echoing in the huge space. The place felt alive, like it was waiting for someone to turn it back on. Jake could see control panels, power junctions, and maintenance access points everywhere. A sound made him look up. A sleek drop pod was descending from the sky, its engines screaming. It landed on the other side of the facility with a crash that shook the ground. Commander Vexthal had arrived. The drop pod's door opened with a hiss of steam. Vexthal stepped out, and Jake's first thought was that the alien was even bigger than he had looked on the videos. 7 feet of muscle and armor, with glowing red eyes that swept the area like searchlights. Vexthal's armor was black and silver, covered with sensors and weapon systems. His plasma cannon hung at his side, already charging with a low hum. When he moved, servos wind and hydraulics hissed. "Human," Vexthal called out, his voice carrying across the facility. "I am Commander Vexthal of the Zarathi Empire. You have come to die with honor." Jake stepped out from behind a conveyor belt. "I'm Jake Morrison. I'm here to fix things." Vexthal tilted his head. "Fix things? You are here to fight." "Same thing sometimes," Jake said. The Zarathi warrior raised his plasma cannon. "You show courage, human. I will make your death quick." The weapon fired with a sound like thunder. The plasma bolt missed Jake by inches, melting a hole in the wall behind him. Jake was already moving, diving behind a processing unit as more shots followed. "The battle has begun," Vexthal announced, probably for the cameras. "The human runs." This is expected, but Jake wasn't running. He was studying. As he moved through the machinery, he looked at every pipe, every wire, every control panel. The facility was like a giant puzzle, and Jake was good at puzzles. He found what he was looking for near the center of the complex. A main control console, covered in alien symbols but with a layout that made sense. Power controls, system diagnostics, emergency shutdowns. Every industrial facility had the same basic functions. Vexthal's heavy footsteps echoed through the space as he searched for his prey. His sensors swept back and forth, looking for heat signatures and movement, But Jake knew how to hide in industrial spaces. He had spent years crawling through maintenance tunnels and equipment bays. "Come out, human," Vexthel called. "Do not shame yourself with cowardice." Jake was under a conveyor belt, looking up at the motor that drove it. Ancient alien engineering, but the principles were the same. Electric motor, gear reduction, drive belt. He pulled out his electrical components and started working. The first trap was simple. Jake rewired the conveyor's control system, connecting it to a motion sensor he had found. When something big moved through the area, the belt would start. Running fast, Vexthel entered the conveyor section, his cannon ready. The motion sensor detected him and triggered Jake's modification. The belt started moving at triple speed, and the warrior stumbled as the moving floor tried to carry him away. "Clever," Vexthel said, regaining his balance. "But tricks will not save you." He fired his plasma cannon at the conveyor motor. The belt stopped, but Jake was already gone, deeper into the facility. The second trap was more complex. Jake found a section with overhead cranes, huge mechanical arms designed to move heavy equipment. The control system was powered down, but the connections were still there. Jake worked quickly, using his cutting torch to splice into the power lines. He rerouted electricity from the main grid, bypassing the safety systems. The cranes started moving, their massive arms swinging through the air. When Vexthel entered the crane section, he found himself dodging 2-ton mechanical arms that swung at him from every direction. His enhanced reflexes saved him, but he had to use his plasma cannon to destroy 2 of the cranes. "You fight like a coward," Vexthel growled. But there was something new in his voice, uncertainty. Jake was learning the facility's systems faster than he had thought possible. Every piece of equipment told him something about how the place worked. The power grid, the control networks, the safety systems. It was all connected, all part of one giant machine. He found the main power distribution center on the 3rd level. Thick cables ran in every direction, carrying electricity to every part of the complex. Jake studied the setup, tracing the power flow with his eyes. "There," he said, pointing to a junction box. "That's the weak point." But he didn't sabotage it, not yet. Instead, he used his torch to cut into the housing, exposing the connections inside. Then he used his electrical components to build a feedback loop, a circuit that would overload when activated. Vexthel's footsteps were getting closer. Jake could hear the warrior moving through the facility, destroying equipment as he searched. The alien was getting frustrated, and frustrated enemies made mistakes. Jake climbed to the 4th level, where the atmospheric processors were located. These machines cleaned the air and maintained the facility's environment. They were also connected to every other system in the complex. "Perfect," Jake said, pulling out his wrench. He started working on the processor's control unit, rerouting connections and bypassing safety limits. The machine started running faster, drawing more power from the grid. Jake smiled as he watched the power indicators climb toward the red zone. "Human!" Vexthel's voice echoed from below. "Stop hiding and face me." Jake looked down through the metal grating. Vexthel was 3 levels below, still searching. The warrior's armor was scratched and dented from his encounters with the machinery. His movements were more cautious now, less confident. "I'm not hiding," Jake called back. "I'm working." He activated the feedback loop he had built in the power distribution center. Electricity surged through the system, overloading circuits and triggering emergency shutdowns. Half the lights in the facility went out. In the darkness below, Jake heard Vexthel curse in his alien language. The warrior's armor lights came on, but they only made him a better target for what Jake was planning next. Jake looked around the atmospheric processor room. Pipes, valves, pressure gauges, and one very interesting emergency release system. He pulled out his wrench and started working on the valve controls. "Let's see how you handle a little pressure," Jake said to himself. The whole facility was starting to feel like an extension of his workshop. Every system, every component, every connection was becoming part of his plan. Vexthel might be the greatest warrior in the galaxy, but Jake was about to turn the entire complex into his weapon, and he was just getting started. The atmospheric processor's emergency release valve opened with a sound like a giant snake hissing. Compressed air shot through the pipes, building pressure throughout the facility's pneumatic systems. Jake watched the pressure gauges climb and smiled. He was turning the entire complex into a pressure cooker. 3 levels below, Vextel moved through the darkness, his armor's lights cutting through the shadows. The warrior was more careful now, checking every corner before advancing. Jake's traps had taught him to respect the human's cunning. "You cannot hide forever," Vextel called out. "Face me like a warrior." Jake was already moving to his next position. He had found something interesting on the facility's blueprints. The central manufacturing bay had a massive stamping press designed to shape metal parts. It was powered by the same pneumatic system he had just overcharged. He reached the manufacturing bay and looked up at the press. It was huge, easily 20 tons of metal and machinery. The control panel was covered in alien symbols, but Jake could read the important parts: power, pressure, activation sequence. He pulled out his electrical components and started rewiring the trigger system the press was designed to activate. When metal was placed on the platform below, Jake bypassed that safety feature and connected the trigger to a simple motion detector. Now it would activate when anything large moved through the area. The sound of Vextel's footsteps echoed through the facility. The warrior was getting closer, following the power cables that Jake had been working on. Jake finished his modifications and moved to the next level. The chemical processing section was Jake's favorite discovery so far. Tanks full of various compounds, mixing chambers, and a filtration system that was still functional after thousands of years. Jake studied the chemical symbols and recognized several compounds. Some were harmless, others were not. He found the smoke generation system, designed to create a protective fog during maintenance operations. Jake modified the mixture, adding compounds that would create a thick, choking cloud. Then he connected the system to the facility's fire suppression network. When Vextel entered the chemical section, Jake activated the smoke system. Thick, gray fog filled the area, cutting visibility to 0. The warrior's armor lights became useless, creating glare that made the situation worse. "Coward!" Vextel growled, firing his plasma cannon blind. The shots went wide, melting holes in the walls, but hitting nothing important. Jake moved through the smoke like a ghost. He knew exactly where he was going because he had studied the facility's layout. He reached the electromagnetic field generators, machines designed to contain dangerous materials during processing. The generators were powered down, but Jake brought them online with a few quick modifications. Electromagnetic fields filled the area, interfering with Vextel's sensors and targeting systems. The warrior's armor began to spark and malfunction. "What is this?" Vextel demanded, his voice distorted by the interference. Jake didn't answer. He was already moving to the next phase of his plan. The facility's main control room was on the 5th level, behind layers of security systems that had been inactive for millennia. Jake brought them online one by one. The security doors were first. Thick metal barriers that could seal off sections of the facility. Jake programmed them to respond to his voice commands only. Now he could control Vextel's movement through the complex. The automated defense systems were next. Ancient weapons designed to protect the facility from intruders. Laser turrets, plasma cannons, and missile launchers that had been waiting centuries for someone to activate them. Jake brought them online and programmed them to target anything in Zerathi armor. Vextel stumbled out of the smoke-filled chemical section, his armor smoking and his movements unsteady. The electromagnetic interference had damaged several of his systems. His plasma cannon was flickering, low on power. "You fight without honor," the warrior said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "I fight to win," Jake replied, his voice coming from speakers throughout the facility. "There's a difference." Vextel looked around, realizing that Jake now controlled the complex's communication system. A human was everywhere and nowhere, speaking from the walls themselves. "Show yourself," Vextel demanded. Instead, Jake activated the first security door. It slammed shut behind the warrior, trapping him in a section of the facility that Jake had chosen. The automated defenses came online and laser fire filled the air. Vexthel dove for cover, his enhanced reflexes barely keeping him alive. The ancient weapons were old, but still deadly. Plasma bolts scorched the air around him as he rolled behind a processing unit. "You cannot defeat me with machines," Vexthel shouted, returning fire at the automated turrets. His shots destroyed 2 of them, but more kept appearing. Jake was in the main control room now, surrounded by displays showing every part of the facility. He could see Vexthel's position, track his movements, and control every system in the complex. It was like being the conductor of a mechanical orchestra. He activated the conveyor belts throughout the facility, creating a maze of moving platforms and obstacles. He brought the robotic arms online, programming them to grab anything that moved through their reach. He even activated the cleaning systems, filling the air with soap and water to make the floors slippery. Vexthel fought his way through the mechanical maze, but each step forward cost him more energy. His armor was damaged, his weapons were running low on power, and he was beginning to tire. The human had turned the entire facility against him. "This is not combat," Vexthel said, breathing hard. "This is machinery, this is engineering," Jake replied. "And I'm very good at engineering." Jake activated the final phase of his plan. The facility's main production line, dormant for thousands of years, came roaring to life. Conveyor belts moved at maximum speed, robotic arms swung through preset patterns, and the massive assembly machinery began its ancient dance. The sound was deafening. Metal crashed against metal, motors whined at full power, and the entire complex shook with mechanical fury. Jake had turned the facility into a giant, deadly machine, and Vexthel was trapped inside it. The warrior fought to reach the control room, but every step was a battle. Robotic arms tried to grab him, conveyor belts tried to carry him into crushing machinery, and automated defenses fired at him from every direction. Jake watched it all from the control room, his hands moving over the alien controls like a pianist playing a complex symphony. Every system, every machine, every piece of equipment was now part of his weapon. "You are skilled," Vexthel admitted, his voice strained with effort, "but you are still only human." "That's what makes me dangerous," Jake said. He activated the facility's emergency systems, designed to shut down all operations in case of catastrophic failure. But Jake had modified them to do the opposite. Instead of shutting down, they overloaded every system in the complex. Lights blazed at maximum brightness. Motors ran at dangerous speeds, and the entire facility began to shake apart. Jake had turned the ancient complex into a bomb, and he was the only one who knew how to control it. Vexthel realized what was happening. The human wasn't just fighting him, he was willing to destroy the entire facility to win. The warrior's respect for his opponent grew, even as his situation became more desperate. "You would die to defeat me?" Vexthel asked. "If necessary," Jake replied, "but I'd rather we both live through this." Jake had one more surprise for the Zerathi warrior. The facility's central hub, where all the control systems came together. If Vexthel could reach it, he might be able to stop Jake's mechanical assault. But getting there would require passing through the most dangerous part of the complex. "Come on," Jake said, opening a path through the machinery. "Let's finish this." The central hub of the facility was a massive circular chamber that rose all 5 levels of the complex. Pipes, cables, and conveyor belts fed into it from every direction like the arteries of a giant mechanical heart. At the center stood the main control platform, surrounded by a maze of processing equipment that Jake had turned into a deadly obstacle course. Vexthel entered the chamber through the only path Jake had left open. The warrior's armor was battered and smoking. His plasma cannon flickered with failing power, but his red eyes still burned with determination. "Impressive, human," Vexthel said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "You have turned this ancient place into your weapon. But this ends now." Jake stood on the control platform 50 feet above the floor, his hands moving across the alien controls. Around him, displays showed the status of every system in the facility. Everything was running at maximum capacity, held together by his modifications, and sheer mechanical knowledge. It doesn't have to end with either of us dying, Jake called down. You could surrender. Vexthal laughed, a sound like grinding metal. A Zarathi warrior does not surrender. We die with honor or we claim victory. The warrior began climbing toward the control platform, moving through the mechanical maze Jake had created. Robotic arms swung at him from every direction. Conveyor belts tried to carry him into crushing machinery. Steam jets blasted superheated air across his path, but Vexthal was still the greatest warrior in the galaxy. He dodged the robotic arms with fluid grace. He leaped over the conveyor belts like they were standing still. He moved through the steam. Without slowing down, Jake watched the warriors approach with growing respect. Even damaged and exhausted, Vexthal was magnificent. But Jake had one more surprise waiting. He activated the facility's final system, one he had been saving for this moment. The gravity generators, designed to assist with heavy manufacturing, came online throughout the chamber. Suddenly, Vexthal was fighting against 3 times normal gravity. The warrior stumbled as the increased weight hit him. His damaged armor servos went in protest. But he kept climbing, his will stronger than the mechanical forces trying to stop him. You fight like no warrior I have ever faced, Vexthal said, forcing himself up another level. You use the battlefield itself as your weapon? I use what works, Jake replied, watching the warrior's slow progress. That's what mechanics do. Vexthal reached the 4th level, only 1 floor below the control platform. His armor was sparking and smoking from the strain. His movements were slower now, but still determined. Jake could see that nothing would stop the warrior from reaching him. You know, Jake said, in another situation, I think we could have been friends. Perhaps, Vexthal agreed, pulling himself up another step, but today, one of us must fall. The warrior raised his plasma cannon, aiming at the control platform. The weapon charged with a sound like distant thunder. Jake realized that Vexthal planned to destroy the controls, even if it meant bringing down the entire facility. That's not going to work, Jake said calmly. He had been watching the power distribution throughout the chamber, tracking the electrical flow through cables and conduits. There, 30 feet above Vexthal's position, was exactly what he needed. A main power coupling that fed electricity to the warriors section of the facility. Jake reached into his toolbox and pulled out his lucky wrench. 40 years old, worn smooth by decades of use, perfectly balanced in his hand. He had thrown this wrench countless times to hit switches and valves in tight spaces. What are you doing? Vexthal demanded, noticing Jake's movement. What I do? Best, Jake said, fixing things that are broken. He threw the wrench. It spun through the air in a perfect arc, sailing over Vexthal's head and striking the power coupling with a metallic clang. The coupling, weakened by Jake's earlier modifications, broke apart. Electricity arced through the air as the power flow was interrupted. The gravity generators shut down. The lights went out in Vexthal's section. Most importantly, the power feeding the warrior's armor was cut off. Vexthal's suit went dead in. Seconds, the servos stopped working, the life support systems failed, and the weapon systems powered down. The warrior found himself trapped inside 2 tons of dead metal, unable to move. What have you done? Vexthal asked, his voice muffled by the powerless armor. Jake climbed down from the control platform, his wrench in hand. He had caught it when it bounced off the power coupling. I fixed the problem, he said simply. He walked over to where Vexthal stood frozen in his armor. The warrior's red eyes glowed behind his faceplate, but the rest of his suit was completely dead. I cannot move, Vexthal said. My armor has become my prison. I can get you out? Jake offered. These suits aren't that different from the equipment I work on. Give me a few minutes with my tools. Vexthal was quiet for a long moment. Around them, the facility's machinery slowly wound down as Jake shut off the overloaded systems. The sudden silence was almost deafening after hours of mechanical noise. You have defeated me, Vexthal said finally. Not with strength or weapons, but with knowledge and cunning. I yield this battle to you, Jake Morrison of Earth. The words were broadcast across the galaxy. In the Zerathi Empire, billions of aliens watch their greatest warrior admit defeat to a human mechanic. On Earth, people cheered in the streets. As news of the victory spread, Jake began working on Vexthal's armor, using his tools to carefully disconnect the power systems and release the mechanical locks. It took 20 minutes to free the warrior from his metal prison. When Vexthal finally stepped out of his armor, he was smaller than Jake had expected. Still tall and powerful, but more normal. The warrior looked around the facility with new eyes. "You understand machines?" Vexthal said. "All machines. Even ones you have never seen before." "Engineering is universal," Jake said. "Physics works the same way everywhere. Once you understand the principles, the details are just details." "The Zerathi Empire will honor our agreement," Vexthal said formally. "The Kepler system belongs to humanity." "You have won it fairly," Jake nodded. "What happens to you now?" "I return to my people and tell them what I learned here today. That strength is not always measured in weapons and armor. Sometimes it is measured in knowledge and the wisdom to use it." The transport ship from Earth arrived 6 hours later. Jake was sitting on the control platform, making notes about the facility systems when Captain Chun found him. "How are you?" "Feeling?" she asked. "Tired," Jake said honestly. "And ready to go home. The media wants to interview you. They're calling you the hero who saved humanity." Jake looked around the ancient facility, now quiet and peaceful. "I just fixed some broken things, that's what I do." The trip back to Earth was different from the journey out. This time, Jake was treated like a celebrity. But he spent most of the time in the engine room with Carol, talking about normal things like reactor maintenance and power system efficiency. When they reached Earth, Jake found himself promoted to chief engineer of the entire Luna Station complex. His first official act was to approve his own vacation request. His second was to have his lucky wrench mounted in a place of honor in his office, but he kept using it for regular maintenance work. 3 months later, Jake was back in the reactor room at Luna Station, fixing the same cooling pump that had started it all. A new engineer, a young woman named Amy Taylor, watched him work. "Is it true what they say?" Amy asked. "That you beat the greatest warrior in the galaxy with just a wrench?" Jake tightened the connection and listened to the pump's rhythm. It sounded good, smooth and steady, the way it should be. "I didn't beat anybody," Jake said. "I just fixed what was broken." "But you're famous. You saved humanity." Jake picked up his toolbox and headed for the door. "I'm a mechanic," he said. "I fix things. Sometimes the things that need fixing are bigger than you'd expect, but the job is still the same." Amy followed him out of the reactor room. "So what's the secret? How do you know what to fix?" Jake smiled and patted his lucky wrench. "Listen to the machines. They'll tell you what's wrong. Then you figure out how to make it right. Everything else is just details." And in the depths of space, the ancient facility on Keth 7 hummed quietly to itself, all its systems running perfectly for the first time in thousands of years. Jake Morrison had fixed it, just like he fixed everything else. Sometimes the best weapon is knowing how things work.